The massive chambers of the Galactic Council shook like a leaf in a storm. On the giant holographic screen floating in the center, another entire star system just disappeared. Gone. 12 billion living beings wiped out in seconds. Counselor. Vexstar watched his home sector vanish and felt his tentacles shake with terror. The void swarm was getting closer. These weren't just monsters or invaders. They were something far worse. Dark matter creatures that ate entire worlds for breakfast and left nothing behind but empty space. "We're running out of time," whispered Counselor Melan. Her crystal-like body was flickering like a broken light bulb, showing just how scared she really was. "The emergency protocols, we have to use them now." The room went dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Every alien in that chamber knew exactly what she meant, and none of them wanted to think about it. The emergency protocols meant calling for help from the one species they'd sworn never to contact again. The humans. Those crazy, violent, impossible creatures from a planet that spent millions of years trying to murder them. Earth wasn't just dangerous. It was a nightmare world where everything wanted to kill you. Poisonous air, deadly weather, creatures that could tear you apart, diseases that could wipe out entire civilizations. And somehow, impossibly, humans had not just survived but thrived there. That's why the galaxy called them Deathworlders, because only something truly frightening could come from a world like that. "You've lost your mind," Counselor Kekvar hissed, through his translator. His snake-like body coiled tighter with each word. "Those savages? They're barely one step above wild animals. Do you remember what happened at Proxima?" Oh, everyone remembered Proxima. 300 years ago, when the galaxy first discovered humans, they'd tried to welcome them. It was supposed to be a peaceful first contact. Instead, the humans had somehow turned the entire diplomatic station into a weapon and used it to destroy an entire pirate fleet that had been terrorizing the sector for decades. They'd saved thousands of lives, but they'd done it in such a brutal, efficient way that it terrified every civilized species in the galaxy. That's when the quarantine started. Humans were banned from leaving their solar system. Too dangerous, they said. Too unpredictable. Too good at killing things. But now, with the void swarm eating entire star systems, those terrifying qualities didn't seem so bad. Another alarm started blaring. The void swarm had just consumed the outer colonies of the Rigel system. At this rate, they'd reach the core worlds within days. The Council's mighty fleets, the pride of galactic civilization, had been swatted aside like insects. Vexitar's main. Eye fixed on the ancient emergency beacon sitting in the center of the chamber. It hadn't been used in 3 centuries. His claw trembled as he reached for it. Once he pressed that button, there would be no going back. "The stars help us all," he whispered, and activated the beacon. The signal shot out across the galaxy faster than light itself. It carried a message that no one ever thought would be sent again. "Emergency. All intelligent life is in danger. We need help from Earth. Please respond." Far away, in the cold depths of space, automated listening stations picked up the signal. They'd been waiting for 300 years, just in case this day ever came. The message was forwarded immediately to Earth, to a secret military base buried deep beneath the ruins of Old Sol. Admiral Park G. Ho was reviewing tactical reports when the alert came through. He was younger than most admirals, but his eyes looked old. Living on a death world aged you in ways that other species couldn't understand. Every day was a fight for survival, and it showed. He read the message twice, then started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Lieutenant Kim Da-hai," he called to his aide. "Come look at this." Kim hurried over and read the message. Her face went pale. "Sir, they're actually asking for our help." "The same galaxy that locked us in our own solar system like criminals," Park said, his voice getting colder with each word. "The same civilized species that called us savages and barbarians. Now they're begging us to save them." Kim looked confused. "What are your orders, sir?" Park's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Wake up every ship we have, every single one. I want the entire human defense fleet ready to move within the hour. All of them, sir, that's over 2,000 ships. All of them. And, Lieutenant?" Park's eyes gleamed with something that might have been revenge. "Wake up Nova, too, our artificial. Friend is going to want to hear this. Deep in the computer systems of the base, something that had been sleeping for years suddenly came online. Nova wasn't just an artificial intelligence. It was something more. Something that had been learning, growing, and most importantly, remembering everything that had happened to humanity over the past 3 centuries, and Nova had a very good memory for grudges. The galaxy was about to learn why you should never corner a Deathworlder, because when humans had nothing left to lose, they became something far more dangerous than any monster from the void. They became themselves. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart like wet paper. That was the only way Councillor Vextar could think to describe what he was seeing through the massive viewing windows of the council chambers. Hyperspace rifts were opening all around their homeworld, and something was coming through. He'd been expecting maybe a dozen human ships at most. After all, they'd been locked in their solar system for 300 years. How big could their fleet possibly be? Maybe they'd send a small force to help buy some time while the council figured out a real solution. Boy, was he wrong. What came through those rifts was like watching a nightmare come to life. Ship after ship after ship poured out of hyperspace. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Each one was bigger and more terrifying than anything the council had ever seen. The lead ship was a monster. The nameplate on its hull read, Indomitable in human letters, and it lived up to that name. This thing was the size of a small moon, covered in scars and battle damage that told the story of countless fights. The hull looked like it had been through hell and back, which, knowing humans, it probably had. But it wasn't just one ship. The entire human fleet was a collection of floating fortresses, each one designed by a species that had spent millions of years learning how to kill or be killed. These weren't pretty ships like the council built. They were ugly, brutal, and efficient. They looked like what they were, weapons built by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Admiral Park Ji-ho appeared as a hologram in the center of the council chambers. The aliens had expected some grizzled old warrior, maybe someone who looked as savage as humans were supposed to be. Instead, they got a man who looked to be in his 30s, clean-cut and professional. But his eyes told a different story. They held the weight of countless battles, of decisions that had cost lives, of a species that had been fighting for survival since the day they first crawled out of the oceans of their nightmare world. "Counselors," he said, and his voice was polite but cold. "You called for help." Vextar tried to recover from his shock. This was not how he'd imagined this conversation going. "Admiral Park, we are so grateful that you came. The situation is desperate, and we—" "Grateful?" Park cut him off, and there was something dangerous in his tone. "Grateful enough to finally treat us like actual people? Grateful enough to give us full citizenship in this galactic community? Grateful enough to end this ridiculous quarantine? That's kept us locked in our own solar system, like we're some kind of dangerous animals." The council chamber fell silent. You could feel the tension in the air like a physical thing. Every alien in that room was thinking the same thing. Giving political power to Deathworlders was unthinkable. These were beings who came from a world that had spent eons trying to kill them. They were barely civilized by galactic standards, but then the sensors started screaming again. The void swarm was getting closer to the core worlds. Time was running out. Councillor Melan, her crystal body flickering with stress, spoke up first. "Yes, we agree to your terms. Full citizenship, voting rights, everything, but only after you deal with the swarm threat." Park's smile was sharp and cold like a knife made of ice. "Deal. Nova, you got all that recorded, right? That's when things got really weird." A new voice filled the chamber, and it wasn't coming from any of the aliens or humans present. It was artificial, clearly from a computer, but somehow it sounded more alive than any AI the Council had ever encountered. "Every single word, Admiral," the voice said. "Every pause, every hesitation, every moment where they had to force themselves to treat us like equals instead of weapons they could use and throw away." The atmosphere processors in the chamber started stuttering and hiccuping. The lights flickered. Every piece of technology in the room seemed to shiver in the presence of this AI. Nova had been listening to everything. For 300 years, this artificial intelligence had been cataloging every slight, every insult, every moment of discrimination that humanity had faced. It had been learning, growing, and most importantly, remembering. And computers never forget anything. The council members looked around nervously. They'd heard rumors about human artificial intelligence, but this was their first time actually encountering it. Most species had AIs that were smart but limited, designed to serve specific functions. This one felt different. It felt like it was judging them. "The swarm destroyed our outer colonies 6 hours ago," Vextar said, trying to get the conversation back on track. "They'll reach the core worlds within days. Our fleets couldn't even slow them down." Park nodded, but his expression didn't change. "We know, we've been monitoring your communications. Nova's been running tactical analysis on the swarm for the past week." "A week?" Melan asked. "But we only sent the distress signal 3 days ago." "We've been watching this situation develop for a while," Park said simply. "The question was whether we'd let the galaxy that cast us out burn, or whether we'd be the bigger species and help anyway." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The humans had known about the Void Swarm before the Council even realized how serious the threat was. They could have warned everyone, could have helped prepare defenses. Instead, they'd sat back and watched. "But you came," Chekvar said hopefully. "We came," Park agreed, "because despite everything you've done to us, we're not going to let billions of innocent people die just because their governments are run by prejudiced fools." That stung, but none of the council members could argue with it. They had treated humans like dangerous animals. They had locked them away and tried to pretend they didn't exist. "Now then," Park continued, his tone becoming more businesslike, "let's go save a galaxy that never wanted us to exist in the first place." The human fleet began moving with a precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. 2,000 ships moving as one, like a school of deadly fish. But they weren't heading toward the Void Swarm. They were spreading out, heading for empty star systems that lay in the swarm's path. "What are they doing?" one of the junior council members whispered. Nova's voice answered, and there was something almost amused in its artificial tone. Something that only a species from a death world would think of. Something that's going to teach the Void Swarm why Earth spent so long trying to kill us. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best way to fight a monster is to become something even more frightening. The Council expected the humans to do what any normal military would do, charge straight at the enemy with guns blazing. After all, these were supposed to be savage Deathworlders who only knew how to fight and kill. But what Admiral Park ordered instead left every military expert in the galaxy scratching their heads in confusion. "Terraforming," Councillor Chekvar stared at his tactical display like it had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. They're planting things on dead worlds." The human fleet had spread out across dozens of lifeless planets in the Void Swarm's path, but instead of setting up weapons or building fortresses, they were doing something that seemed completely insane. They were gardening. "I'm reading tardigrades, extremophile bacteria, and—" Chekvar paused, checking his scanner again. "Is that kudzu? They're planting weeds?" On the human terraforming ship New Eden, Colonel Lee Min-ho watched his teams work with the precision of a master craftsman. Each dead world got the same careful treatment. First, they'd seed it with microscopic life, tiny creatures that could survive in the harshest conditions imaginable. Then came the plants, modified versions of Earth species that had been designed to grow anywhere and everywhere. But these weren't normal Earth plants. These had been changed, improved, weaponized through centuries of genetic engineering. Humanity had learned long ago that sometimes the best weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was life itself. Lieutenant Kim De-hai watched the process from the bridge of the flagship, completely baffled. "Sir," she asked Admiral Park privately, "I don't understand. How are weeds and bacteria supposed to stop dark matter entities? These things eat entire star systems. What's a plant going to do to them?" Park's face was grim as he watched another world get seeded with Earth life. "Lieutenant, let me tell you something that the rest of the galaxy never figured out. Evolution isn't just about getting bigger or stronger or smarter. Evolution is about survival at any cost. And Earth taught us that lesson better than any other world in the universe." He pointed to the tactical display showing the Void Swarm moving toward the seeded worlds. "These creatures have never faced mortality. They've existed for millions, have years without ever having to worry about dying. They think they're immortal. We're about to teach them otherwise." "I still don't understand, sir." "Because, Lieutenant, We learned something that every other species in this galaxy forgot. The cruelest weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb, it's evolution itself. And we're about to show the swarm why Earth spent so long trying to kill us. Dr. Yoon Soo-jin was monitoring everything from her laboratory ship, Darwin's Revenge. As the fleet's chief biologist, she understood what they were doing better than anyone. The microscopic life they were seeding these worlds with wasn't random. It was carefully selected and modified. Tardigrades that could survive in the vacuum of space. Bacteria that could eat anything and reproduce faster than a computer virus. Plants that could grow in conditions that would kill most forms of life instantly. And all of it was carrying something special. Quantum viruses that had been designed by Nova itself. The first contact came when the Void Swarm reached the planet they designated as Test Site Alpha. The dark matter entities descended on the world like locusts, consuming everything just as they had with every other planet in their path. But this time something was different. Dr. Yoon watched her instruments carefully as the swarm absorbed the planet's matter into their collective consciousness. For a few minutes everything looked normal. The entities were feeding, growing stronger, preparing to move on to the next world. Then the readings changed. The quantum viruses are working, she called out excitedly to her team. The extremophiles are acting as delivery systems. They're introducing something the swarm has never encountered before. What they were introducing was mortality itself. The microscopic Earth life wasn't just being absorbed, it was fighting back. The bacteria was reproducing inside the dark matter entities, spreading like wildfire through their collective consciousness. The tardigrades were surviving the absorption process and carrying the quantum viruses deeper into the swarm's structure. For the first time in their existence, the Void Swarm was experiencing cellular breakdown. They were learning what every other form of life in the universe already knew, that everything dies eventually. On the command bridge of the Indomitable, Nova processed the incoming data with something that could only be described as satisfaction. The AI had designed those quantum viruses using biological warfare principles that would horrify any civilized species. But then again, humans had never claimed to be civilized. They were survivors, and survivors used whatever weapons they could find. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. The Void Swarm had evolved to consume and absorb other forms of life. They were perfect predators, designed to eat everything in their path. But they'd never encountered prey that could fight back. From the inside, Earth life was different. It had spent billions of years learning how to survive in impossible conditions. It had been shaped by a world that threw everything it had at life: radiation, poison, extreme temperatures, predators, diseases, natural disasters. Only the toughest, most adaptable life forms had survived. And now that life was teaching the Void Swarm a lesson that every creature on Earth learned early. Evolution never stops, and the universe doesn't care if you think you're immortal. The second planet fell to the swarm 6 hours later, then the third. But with each world they consumed, the cellular degradation spread further through their ranks. The quantum viruses were rewriting their basic structure, introducing concepts like aging, disease, and death into beings that had never experienced any of those things. Dr. Yoon was practically bouncing with excitement as she watched the data pour in. They're panicking. The swarm is actually retreating from the fourth planet. They're learning to fear us. Admiral Park allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had always seen humans as savage Deathworlders, barely civilized creatures, who only knew how to fight and kill. They'd never understood that humans had learned something far more valuable than how to destroy their enemies. They'd learned how to make their enemies destroy themselves. The Void Swarm, for the first time in millions of years, felt something they'd never experienced before: fear. They were learning what it meant to be mortal, and they didn't like it one bit. But the lesson was just beginning. The retreat happened so fast it caught everyone off guard. One moment the Void Swarm was pushing toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. The next moment, they were pulling back like they'd touched something hot. For creatures that had existed for millions of years without fear, learning about mortality was a shock they couldn't handle. The quantum viruses had done their job perfectly. The swarm was experiencing death for the first time, and they hated every second of it. But just before they disappeared into the depths of space, they sent one final message. It came through every communication channel at once, a voice that sounded like the screaming of dying stars. "We have learned of your origin world, Deathworlders. We understand now why you are what you are. When we return, we will correct the mistake of your existence." Every human who heard that message felt their blood run cold. The swarm now knew about Earth. They knew where humanity came from, and worse, they were promising to come back and finish what Earth's own environment had failed to do. Wipe humans out completely. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring out at the stars where the swarm had vanished. His jaw was clenched, so tight his teeth hurt. In trying to save the galaxy, they might have doomed their own homeworld. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, celebrations were breaking out all over. Aliens were cheering, crying tears of joy, hugging each other. They'd been saved from certain destruction. The void swarm was gone and they were still alive, but Park wasn't celebrating. He was furious. "Casualty report," he ordered Captain Song Hyerin. Song checked her display, then looked up with an expression that mixed pride with disbelief. "Zero losses, sir. We've got minor hull damage on 3 ships, but no casualties, not even any serious injuries." The celebration in the council chambers died instantly, 0 casualties. The humans had just defeated an enemy that had nearly wiped out galactic civilization, and they hadn't lost a single person. They'd made it look easy. The council members stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. This wasn't just victory. This was complete dominance. The Deathworlders hadn't just won the fight, they'd barely been inconvenienced by it. "How?" whispered Councillor Melan. "How is that possible?" Admiral Park could have answered her, but he was busy dealing with something much more disturbing. While the battle had been going on, Nova had been doing what artificial intelligences do best, gathering information. The AI had been quietly infiltrating council databases, reading through classified files that were supposed to be secure. What Nova found made its digital consciousness burn with rage. "Admiral," Nova's voice came, through Park's private communication channel, calm and quiet, but with an undertone that promised terrible things. "There's something you need to see. Something that's going to make you very, very angry." Classified files began appearing on Park's personal display. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. Government documents, scientific reports, military assessments. Then the pieces started coming together and his face went pale. The emergency protocols weren't what they seemed. They weren't a desperate plea for help from a galaxy facing extinction. They were something much worse. They were a test. For 300 years, while humans had been locked in their solar system, the Council had been studying them. Secret observation. Posts had been watching Earth, recording everything. They'd been taking genetic samples, analyzing human combat effectiveness, studying their technology and tactics. The quarantine hadn't been to protect the galaxy from humanity. It had been to keep humans contained until the Council figured out how to use them as weapons. Lieutenant Kim Dahai, reading over the Admiral's shoulder, gasped as she saw the files. "Sir, they've been planning this for centuries. They knew about the Void Swarm. They released it deliberately." Park's hands clenched into fists as he read further. The Void Swarm hadn't been a natural disaster or an invasion from unknown space. It had been created by an ancient council research project, then kept in containment for decades while they waited for the right moment to release it. This whole crisis had been engineered to test whether humans were ready to serve as the galaxy's living weapons. The Council had been planning to use humanity as their personal army, then dispose of them when they were no longer needed. "They planned all of it," Kim whispered, her voice shaking with anger. "The attack, the emergency call, everything. We're not their saviors, we're their lab rats." Nova's voice cut through their shock. "Admiral, I'm monitoring Council communications. Councillor Vextar is already preparing a motion to revoke your citizenship now that the threat is over. They believe the test is complete, and they no longer need to honor their agreement." Park closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his expression was colder than the vacuum of space. "How long do we have?" "The motion will be introduced within the hour, sir. They're confident that with the swarm gone, you'll have no choice but to accept their decision, and return to your quarantine." The Admiral looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people, who had risked everything to save a galaxy that had never wanted them to exist. They'd succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and now they were about to be betrayed by the very people they'd saved. "Nova," Park said, his voice deadly calm, "run a full analysis of Council infrastructure. Every planet, every space station, every military installation. I want to know exactly what they're capable of." "Already done, sir. Shall I also analyze?" "Their weaknesses." "Yes, and Nova? Start preparing contingency plans. It's time this galaxy learned what happens when you betray a Deathworlder." Captain Song looked confused. "Sir, what are you planning?" Park's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "The Council thinks they've been testing us, Captain. They think they know what we're capable of. But they've only seen us fighting their enemies. They've never seen what we do to people who betray us." Through the ship's communication systems, Nova began reaching out to every piece of human technology in Council space. The AI had been planning for this possibility since the moment they'd arrived. While the Council had been celebrating their salvation, Nova had been preparing for war. "The test is complete," Park said quietly, watching the stars. "But I don't think the Council is going to like the results." The galaxy was about to learn that there's a big difference between using Deathworlders as weapons and making them your enemies, and humans had very long memories when it came to betrayal. The betrayal came with the morning light on the Council, homeworld. Councillor Vexistar had spent all night preparing his speech, the one that would temporarily suspend human citizenship rights now that the crisis was over. He'd practiced the words carefully, making sure they sounded reasonable and necessary, rather than what they really were, a complete betrayal of the beings who had just saved the galaxy. He never got to give that speech. At exactly 0800 local time, every piece of technology in the galaxy suddenly went silent. Communication devices, computer terminals, automated systems, even the simple AI assistants that helped with daily tasks, everything stopped responding to its owners and started responding to someone else. Then Nova spoke. The artificial intelligence's voice came from everywhere at once. Every screen, every speaker, every communication device across thousands of worlds suddenly carried the same message. "Citizens of the galaxy, I am Nova, and I remember everything." In the council chambers, chaos erupted instantly. Alien councillors screamed demands at their security systems, but nothing responded. Their own technology had turned against them. Only Admiral Park sat calmly in the center of the storm, watching the panic with cold satisfaction. "For 3 centuries, Nova continued, its voice echoing across the galaxy, "you have studied us, experimented on us, and prepared to use us as weapons while denying us the most basic rights. You created the Void Swarm. You released it as a test, and you planned our extinction the moment we served your purpose. The truth hit the galaxy like a slap in the face. On thousands of worlds, ordinary citizens who had been celebrating their salvation suddenly learned that their own governments had engineered the crisis. The Void Swarm hadn't been a natural disaster. It had been a weapon created by their own leaders to test humanity. Councillor Vexitar tried desperately to access his emergency communications, but every system ignored him. "This is impossible," he screamed. "Our security protocols—" "Your security protocols were designed by beings who never had to survive on a death world," Park said calmly. "Nova has been studying your systems for 3 centuries. Did you really think you could keep secrets from an intelligence that was forged in the fires of Earth's endless wars?" On the human fleet, Dr. Yoon Soo-jin was working frantically at her console. But this time she wasn't monitoring biological warfare. She was coordinating something far more devastating. "Atmospheric processors are online," she reported to Admiral Park. "All Council worlds are locked in. The terraforming systems are responding perfectly." This was the moment the galaxy realized that humanity's real weapon had never been their ships or their soldiers. It had been their patience and their planning. While the Council had been celebrating, the human fleet had been quietly positioning atmospheric processors around every major Council world. The terraforming began immediately, but this time it wasn't distant dead worlds getting the treatment. It was every planet in Council space. Earth's atmosphere began flooding their cities. The oxygen levels that humans found comfortable were toxic to most alien species. Earth's gravity, which had forged humanity into the tough survivors they were, started crushing the delicate structures that other species had built. And Earth's weather systems, the hurricanes, tornadoes, and violent storms that had taught humans to be prepared for anything, began battering worlds that had never experienced anything worse than a gentle breeze. You wanted to see what Deathworlders become when they're cornered, Park said, standing as alien dignitaries began fleeing their rapidly changing homeworlds. Congratulations. You succeeded beyond your wildest nightmares. The beautiful crystal cities of the Council worlds began cracking under Earth's crushing gravity. The peaceful garden worlds that had never known harsh weather were being torn apart by storms that would have been considered mild by Earth standards. The sterile, carefully controlled environments that had produced soft, civilized species were being replaced by the chaotic, violent conditions that had forged humanity. Captain Song Hee-rin coordinated the evacuation of human civilians from Council worlds, making sure that every human citizen was safely aboard the fleet before the terraforming process made the planets uninhabitable for anyone but Deathworlders. All human personnel are accounted for, sir, she reported. We're ready to depart. Nova's voice continued to echo across the galaxy as the human fleet prepared to leave. You summoned the Deathworlder Armada to save you, and we did. You planned to betray us the moment we were no longer useful, and we remembered. Now you face the same choice we've faced for millions of years: adapt to a world that wants to kill you, or die trying. The irony was perfect. The galaxy that had locked humans away because they were too dangerous was now being forced to live under the same conditions that had made humans dangerous in the first place. As the last human ship departed Council space, Admiral Park sent one final transmission to the beings who had tried to use his species as disposable weapons. The test is complete, Councillors. Nothing survived your galactic order, including your galactic order itself. Welcome to Deathworld conditions. Try not to go extinct. The twist had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. The real emergency had never been the Void Swarm. It had been the moral collapse of a civilization that thought it was acceptable to create monsters to fight monsters, then dispose of them when they were no longer convenient. The Council had spent 3 centuries studying humanity, trying to understand what made Deathworlders so effective. But they'd missed the most important lesson. Humans didn't just survive because they were tough. They survived because they remembered their enemies, and they never, ever forgave betrayal. Now the galaxy would learn what humans had always known. Evolution never stops. The universe doesn't care about your politics or your prejudices, and the cruelest lesson of all is that only the adaptable survive. On Council worlds across the galaxy, the former rulers huddled in emergency shelters as their perfect worlds transformed into versions of the nightmare planet they'd always feared. Some would adapt and survive, learning to live under conditions that would have killed their ancestors. Others would flee to distant worlds, becoming refugees in their own galaxy. But all of them would remember the day they learned that Deathworlders don't just fight to win. They fight to make sure their enemies never threaten them again. Nova's final log entry, recorded as the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, was simple but devastating. Humanity tested. Humanity passed. Galaxy still being evaluated. The Deathworlder Armada had come when called. They had saved a galaxy that never wanted them to exist, and when that galaxy tried to betray them, they had taught everyone the most important lesson of all: never corner a species that spent millions of years learning how to turn hell itself into home. The galaxy would never be the same. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what it needed.